Hello everyone, my name is Lizard Constantine. I hope the new year is treating you well and hope you stay safe in driving as New Yorkers are known for not being able to drive. But I hope you all stay well, and enough jokes aside. I will be talking about a book I read or reread, William Faulkner's Absalom Absalom. The quote derives from the story of Absalom Absalom from the Bible, of which Ammon raped his sister and tried to overpower the king David, his father, in the story of Absalom Absalom in the Bible. This book is set in 1936 and is very much an anti-Gone with the Wind novel. Gone with the Wind was a novel in 1936 which helped increase the awareness of African American roles in movies and TV. It talks about the Civil War in the South just as much as Absalom Absalom does. I will read you a quote from the end of the book. Shreve asks Quentin at the end of the book whether or not he hates the South. Here is a quote. Now I want you to tell me just one thing more. Why do you hate the South? Quote, I don't hate it. End quote. Quentin said quickly at once, immediately. I don't hate it, he said. I don't hate it, he thought, painting in the cold air, the iron New England dark. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. So the novel is about Quentin Compson, who is told single-handedly and unreliably by Miss Rosa, who is the sister of Adeline Caulfield, who married Thomas Sutpen, the main subject of the novel. Miss Rosa is an unreliable narrator, for she is emotionally attached to the case, and being emotionally attached to the case makes the case questionable in itself and of itself. Adeline Caulfield dies early on in the novel, and the first two chapters are about Miss Rosa telling Quentin Compson stories of what she had encountered or heard about Thomas Sutpen. Thomas Sutpen was a man who went from nowhere to riches, which is a rags to riches stories of Mafia, the video game, or Goodfellas and Casino by Martin Scorsese. Thomas Sutpen hosts slave fights in which the slaves fight each other for sport and game and for the amusement and wills of Thomas Sutpen. Faulkner created this fictional county of the South called Yoknapatawpha County. It takes place in all his novels, and William Faulkner's characters, such as the Taurus from the Snow Patrol, I believe, or Quentin Compson from other novels he read, reoccurs in the novel here. So, chapter 3 is a shift of narrative from Miss Rosa's perspective to third-person omniscient narrator perspective. There is a shift in narration to emphasize the unreliability and the emphasis of how everything is just a story and how everything becomes a faded memory where stories are told and stories are forgotten and stories are never won but and endured and listened to. It begs the question of which strip cover lit from Adrian, the YouTube channel, talks about how history is just a story in which people view the stories rather than being parables or lessons in storytelling as fact or gospel, such as the Bible, where people take stories literally, some of them do, instead of figuratively. Anyways, Henry and Judith are sisters, and Henry and Judith have intercourse, and Henry prevents Judith from marrying in the future. Henry, Thomas Sutpen, and Charles Bond go to war in the Civil War, and they fight around 1860, and Quentin Thompson goes to college in the University of Mississippi, which, if my recollections be proven true, that it is 40 miles from Oxford. William Faulkner grew up in Oxford, so there is some connections between the author and the tale of which the author espouses himself. Charles Bond dies in a shootout with Henry. Judith is a virgin, which is emphasized in the novel as a symbol of purity. There are animal symbols, which I imagine as a means towards providing nutrients and good health towards the people, and the innocence of the animal in the way of such statements saying that the animal is pure and innocent compared to human beings, and how human beings are more cruel than the animals themselves, as they have no will of their own and are subjected to the wills and constraints of human beings at large in itself. Thomas Sutpen goes to Jefferson in Yoknapatawpha County, and he goes from nothing to fame like F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, in which Gatsby arose from questionable means and sustained his wealth for a brief period of time before he loses it. I will read you some quotes from the novel. Here is on page 183, where it says, he had, quote, he had learned the difference not only between white men and black ones, but he was learning that there was a difference between white men and white men not to be measured by lifting anvils of gouging eyes or how much whiskey you could drink, then get up and walk out of the room. That is, he had begun to discern that without being aware of it yet, he still thought that it was just a matter of where you were spawned and how lucky or not lucky, and that the lucky ones would be even slower and lother than the unlucky to take any advantage of it or credit for it, feel that it gave them anything more than the luck that they would feel if anything more tender toward the unlucky than the unlucky would ever need to feel toward them. Faulkner is a master of playing with words, and although in chapter 7 some of the wordplay is quite poor, the book is a masterclass of emotion and syntax and beautiful writing. The editor of William Faulkner, who was the editor of Cormac McCarthy, and it was published by Random House, said, "This is damn confusing. There is a chronology of the years of which the novel takes place in 1833, and it helps systematize and organize the nonlinear events, much like True Detective, in compressing and understanding the novel itself." Here is another quote from William Faulkner, and as a side note, William Faulkner writes long, enduring sentences where pages and pages of a single sentence can occur, and in chapter 6, it is known for having the longest sentence in the history of literature, which is 12,088 words, I believe. I could be mistaken, but it's somewhere around there. Anyways, here is the next quote on page 189. Because he was not mad, he insisted on that to grandfather. He was just thinking, because he knew that something would have to be done about it. He would have to do something about it in order to live with himself for the rest of his life, and he could not decide what it was because of the innocence which he had just discovered he had, which the innocence, not the man, the tradition he would have to compete with. He had nothing to compare with and gouge it by but the rifle analogy, and it would not make any sense by that. That was on page 189, and now we are on page 190. There are also ghosts and demons in the book which haunt Shreve in chapters 6 and 7, and there's some conspiracy theories which involve how after the death of a soldier in the Civil War, and if you visit Gettysburg or the Battle of Shiloh, that you will see the ghosts and remains of the dead, of which they will haunt you during your visit there. Here is a quote from page 190. But I can't shoot him. And the other, no, that wouldn't do no good. And the first, what shall we do then? And the other, I don't know. And the first, but I can't shoot him. I could slip right up there through the bushes and lay there until he came out to lay in the hammock and shoot him. And the other, no, that wouldn't do no good. And the first, then what shall we do? And the other, I don't know. End quote. I am finding more quotes to talk about. Here is a quote from page 195 where Faulkner states, I learned little save that most of the deeds, good and bad, incurring a problem of plaintiffs or reward either within the scope of the man's abilities had already been performed and were to be learned about only from books. So I listened when he would read to us. I realize now that on most of these occasions he resorted to reading aloud when he saw that the moment had come when his entire school was on the point of rising and leaving the room. End quote. There is a question of whether knowledge can be gained a priori or a posteriori in a philosophical sense, and whether knowledge can be gained from books alone or through first-hand experience. I believe that knowledge can be gained through the synthesis of both first-hand experience and literature. Here is a quote about the themes of the novel, which are expressed by William Faulkner. These quotes are taken out of context in a large sample into a smaller one. How there was something about a man's destiny, or about the man that caused destiny to shape itself to him like his clothes did, like the same coat that knew might have fitted 1,000 men, yet after one man was worn, it was for a while, it fits no one else, and you can tell it anywhere you see it, even if all you see is a sleeve or a lapel, so that the demon's, chief said, destiny had fitted itself to him, to his innocence, his pristine aptitude for platform drama, and childlike, heroic simplicity, just as the fine broadcloth uniform which you could have seen on 10,000 men during those 4 years, which he wore when he came in the office on the afternoon, 30 years later, has fitted itself to the swaggering of all his gestures and to the forensic verbiage in which he stated calmly, without frank innocence, which we call of a child, except that a human child is the only living creature that is never either frank or innocent, the most simple and most outrageous things. End quote. 198. Faulkner writes long sentences, which is called stream of conscious writing. As stated before, one of his sentences is the longest in English literature, up to 1,000 words or more, in chapter 6. The purpose of these long sentences is not to annoy the reader with his stream of consciousness writings like Virginia Woolf or James Joyce, but to bring the reader into the world and through Martin Heidegger analysis to suggest that man is a being who is brought into the world without prior a priori substance and must live in the world for the rest of his life without assistance or without knowledge of the world in which he lives in. Here is an example of a long sentence on page 202. Quote, a spot of earth which might have been created and set aside by heaven itself, grandfather said, as a theater for violence and injustice and bloodshed and all the satanic lust of human greed and cruelty, for the last despair and fury of all the pariah interdict and all the doom, a little island set in the smiling and fairy lark and incredible indigo sea, which was the hallway point between what we call the jungle and what we call civilization. Halfway between the dark, inscrutable continent from which the black blood, the black bones and the flesh, and thinking and remembering and hopes and desires was ravished by violence, and the cold known had to which it was doomed, the civilized land and people which had expelled some of its own blood, and thinking and desires that had become too crass to be faced and borne longer. That is from page 202. Faulkner does not hide away from the theories of race, of which encompass the South in the 1900s. There are frequent uses of the N-word in which are meant not as a derogatory or negative view of the black race, but to place the reader in the world of the novel as if they were in the world of the novel itself. The purpose of Quentin Tarantino used a white man using the N-word in his work is to provide a sense of realism and world building through which the characters explore and which the settings become a vessel for the characters and explored by the characters. There is also a point in the novel where a man hides himself in the attic and dies there. I believe this is Mr. Compton, but I can't be wrong. It could be someone else. There is another man in the novel named Ross Jones who idolizes Sutpen and lives in an abandoned cabin or house in the South during 1833. There is an argument between Ernest Hemingway, author of For Whom the Bell Tolls and The Sun Also Rises, where he had an argument with Faulkner about whether or not fancy words are necessary in telling a good story. Faulkner was quoted to having said that Hemingway never sent his readers to the dictionary, and Hemingway responded with saying that he knows the fancy words well enough but doesn't need to use them. There is a question of whether you need to use fancy words in fiction to tell a good story, and although they are nice and pretty and fun to remember, it is unnecessary in telling a good story. Robert McKee in Story emphasized how telling a good story is more important than the prose or the characters in which the novel is expressed throughout. If you enjoy Cormac McCarthy or Ernest Hemingway or James Joyce or Virginia Woolf, then you will enjoy and James Joyce, then you will enjoy Faulkner. Faulkner is for those who want to feel the richness of a writer's ability to bring the reader into the world of which they are telling the story through. Although the long words can be daunting, it is not that difficult to understand. This is one of Faulkner's most difficult stories he has written, and is not a best introduction to his work or overture at large. If you would like an introduction to Faulkner, I suggest A Rose for Emily, Burning, which is taught in school, or The Sound or Light in August. Cormac McCarthy, in an interview with Oprah, was asked whether he writes every day or whether he was inspired to write. Cormac McCarthy responded by quoting Faulkner, who said, "I only write when I'm inspired, and I'm inspired every day." This has been Lucian Constantine signing off. I hope you enjoy this video and are having a great New Year, and your New Year's resolutions haven't faltered or wavered in the first 2 weeks of the new year. As always, stay safe and have a good day. Thank you for watching. I love every and each and every one of you, and I hope you all well and safe travels. Stay frosty. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye. If you are wondering what my thoughts on the book are, is I enjoyed the novel. It is certainly not something you can read in multiple sittings, although in short duration, like a page or two here and there, the text can be a bit daunting and overwhelming, like nonfiction books, with the problem of the overwrought of information or information overload. I enjoy the prose. I do like longer prose and more flowery prose in general than superficial or bland prose like Raymond Carver and We Need to Talk About Love or Cathedral Stories. This book knocked me out of the park, and I enjoyed the complex themes and the three-dimensional characters. Everyone seemed three-dimensional and fully fleshed out, which is hard to do when writing a book to make everyone feel unique and special. If you enjoy Cormac McCarthy, you'll enjoy Faulkner, as Cormac McCarthy was influenced by Faulkner. And I enjoyed the theme and the writing style. The content is dark, as all great stories are. However, in chapter 7, I found some of the syntax to be poor in the beginning of chapter 7 as compared to the rest of the novel. This is my favorite Cormac McCarthy, and I enjoy it for what it was. This year, I'll be reviewing more William Faulkner books and possibly Ernest Hemingway. I'm not sure. I read these books very frequently in my youth in order to help me become a better writer. What I learned from this book is to remove your biases towards a race and to not be prejudicial towards one another due to religion, race, or sex, and to empathize others in difficult situations and put yourself in the perspective of others as well. This has been Lucy Constantine. Thank you for watching. and have a good day. Bye.